At The Atlantic, we're storytellers, and I'm always interested in the question, if you were to write a story today and kind of highlight some of the most villainous governments in this story and some of the most heroic governments in your story, who would they be? Well,
I always think about heroic people. If you're in government, you've got to be careful calling yourself a hero. I mean, doing the right thing is not heroic. Doing the right thing is, if you're in government, is actually exercising power for the purposes that it's offered. I mean, the people who, the village in Belgium, the Catholic village in Belgium that said to my aunt and my grandmother in 1942 when they arrived and said, we've been summoned to Brussels railway station and we don't think it's good that we go there, will you take us in? That Catholic family who welcomed in my aunt and my grandmother, that's heroic because they're putting their own lives on the line in an incredible way. But I do think that there are governments that are doing the right thing, and it's a surprising one because the government of Uganda, for example, is in the news for issues in respect of gay rights, where it has a very repressive attitude. But if you're a refugee in Uganda, you get a plot of land, you get the right to work, your kids go into services, and you're given freedom of movement across the whole country. Surprise, surprise, in Kampala in 2014, when they did a study, 90% of refugees are off humanitarian aid because they're earning their own living. And so the heroes, I went to Kampala and I met a South Sudanese woman who told me an unspeakable story about her relatives being killed in front of her, sliced up, she said, in front of her. She fled to Uganda. We gave her a business loan. She set up a banana ripening business where she bought bananas for the equivalent of $1 and sold them for $1.50 6 weeks later. She rented a little shack from us to ripen the bananas. She then said, do you know what I did with the money? And I said, no. She said, I paid the school fees of my daughter. And I said, well, she said, do you want to meet my daughter? I said, of course. And where's your daughter? I said, well, she's sitting here. So we went and met the daughter. The daughter is studying for a Master of Public Health at the University of Kampala. And when I asked the daughter, what do you want to do when you qualify? She said, I want to go back to South Sudan to improve the healthcare system in South Sudan. That is doing the right thing. The woman, in some ways, was heroic, but the government of Uganda are doing the right thing, which is, I think it is. There are choices in politics where you've got a trade-off between popularity and doing the right thing, and there are also places where doing the right thing is costly. But actually, this should be a win-win. And I say this to you as Americans: refugees who come here are more likely to be in work than the average American. Right. They're going to be taxpayers, not welfare recipients. They actually pay back their car loans in greater proportion than the rest of the United States. Levels of criminality are below the American average. So it's not like we're asking you to offer charity to people who are going to become an injury to your country. We're asking you to do the right thing for people who are actually going to be an asset to your country. And so I think that while I wouldn't call that heroic, I would call that appropriate, really.
Villains?
In this scale. No.
Villains?
Well, that's a tempting list. I mean, I think that we've made it a rule. I mean, it's obviously a very toxic political environment in the US at the moment. And we've made it an absolute rule that we don't, to use what you call soccer, what I call football. I always say to people, play the ball, not the man. In other words, play the policy, not the personality. So we don't produce lists of villains, starting with someone you might guess, because that is not our role. We are a service delivery agency that can speak to our understanding of the needs of the people who we are helping around the world and here. And so when we say it's wrong for the administration to propose a 30% cut in humanitarian aid funding, or when we say it's wrong for the administration to cut by 3/4 the number of refugees who are allowed into the US, just in parentheses, there are 50,000 Iraqis who've worked for your government as translators of the military or translators of diplomats, who've applied to come here under something it was called the Special Immigrant Visa Program, it's now called the P2 visa program. This fiscal year, 36 of those people have been allowed to come to the United States, even though they put their lives on the line for you and your government. We don't say about that nasty things about the president. We say that the policies are wrong. And so I think it's important as a non-partisan charity that we speak to what we know, which is the policy, rather than to the personality.